Hey everyone, on today's episode, we're talking all about our feedback from a conference we just came back from that is all for home improvement and design build contractors. And really, we talk about how the 8-figure remodeling company owners think and operate as a whole. So check it out. Hey everyone, welcome back to Contractor Growth Network. Logan Shinholzer here, owner, and I'm joined by Ian McLean, who is our Director of Marketing, and Mike Kyle, who is our Content Manager. So today, we're going to be talking all about this conference that we just came back from. It's called the Pinnacle Experience up in Philadelphia, put on by the parent company of Pro Remodeler, the magazine, and each of us had different takeaways from our own perspectives of, talking to some of these company owners. So it's just going to be a good open conversation around it all. So we'll go ahead. Mike, what was your big takeaway, man? We'll kick it off with you.
I think my biggest takeaway was there's so many people that are doing so much more. And it really is just a matter of getting out of like that fearful mindset, taking the jump, and then doing whatever you can in order to make it work. Like if your foot is on the gas, good things happen.
What do you mean by that?
Like, I'm going to take
and give some context because or I'll just give some context back happen. So like these are essentially, it was half the house was remodeling, like design build, half the house, meaning attendees, was on the home improvement side. So a lot of windows and doors companies. But on the DB side, you had anybody as small as $1 million a year in revenue, and then all the way up through $50-60 million a year in revenue just on interior and exterior remodeling.
Yeah, I think a lot of this came down to, in the conversations that we had, Ian and I had dinner with 3 different remodelers, design build, who were doing over 3 million. And the thing that kept coming up, it felt like, was I'm doing SEO, I'm doing content, I'm doing all of these things. And I feel like there's a lot of hesitancy from time to time around some of the clients we work with or people in our world where they're scared to make that commitment. Whether it's they feel like they don't have enough time, they don't know how to do it. These companies, that's not a fear for them. They find a way to figure it out and they make it happen.
Ian, what did you think about it?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest takeaway I had is that like you are going to be a reflection of the people that you hang out with to a certain extent. Like we heard from multiple speakers there that there's essentially been like somewhat of a contraction in the market as a whole. I heard the term 5% contraction across the board. But then at the same time, they were speaking to this audience, all of whom seem to be seeing growth, right? So I think it speaks to the quality of people that were at that event, and that the energy that they're putting in is market constraints aren't everything, right? Sometimes just because the market isn't doing well doesn't mean that your business can't be powering through that. I think the fact that all of the people that we spoke with were doing marketing in some capacity really speaks to the direction of those companies, right? Is that they weren't seeing that pain the same way that other contractors might be. And like Mike said, a lot of these people are doing the right stuff, right? And that's having a positive impact on their business.
Yeah, I felt a lot of the same things. What I thought was cool was even these larger companies, and when I say larger, I mean, it's all relative, but I would say for the grand overarching audience that's listening to us right now, when we're talking about $50 or $60 million in revenue, that's pretty large by any metric. They were still in the room, and it wasn't like they just sent, like their office admin to like, hey, you figure out what's going on and report back to us. It was like the presidents, the CEOs, like these are the people at the very top of the food chain, and they were there. And I was watching, so like they're pulling out their phones and taking photos of PowerPoint presentations of slides, and they're there essentially to continue to get better. And what's funny is a lot of people at these smaller, let's say like the free trade shows, where it's typically, not our ideal client whatsoever because they're so early on. When you say marketing, they shy away and go, no, there's no way I'm talking to you. I already have marketing set, even though they don't have marketing set. But the big time people are like, oh, come talk to you. Like, they're not afraid to say, hey, that all makes sense, but like, we're good. But at least they're like receptive to like, what do you have going on? Which I thought was very cool because, everybody talks about like, oh, if I said yes to everybody, I would be broke. And it's like, yeah, but like, if you said yes to some people after at least vetting them a little bit, you'd probably be a little bit further along than you are right now. So I thought just the open-mindedness of how they viewed the business, of like the same way that Michael Jordan goes, look, I'm number one, but I'm going to hire a guy named Tim Grover who's going to make me 1% better. So it wasn't a question of, is he going to be number one again? It was, he was doing the things and spending the time to get 1% better, which in the long run, I mean, I think we know how that all ended up. So that was like the coolest part in my mind.
Ian actually had this is your first experience going to something like this.
Yeah, no, I've been much more behind the scenes, definitely not like a sales guy. So it's always been my space, but I wanted to come to the event really to get some face time with clients and get a little bit more insight on the market. So yeah, it was a unique experience, but I think a really profitable one. I think something I saw too, just to piggyback off what Logan was talking about, is like none of these people are asking themselves the question of whether or not they should be marketing, right? They are all doing something, right? Not all of them are doing the same things. Not all of them are really emphasizing digital. Some of them are doing something that's much more traditional, but I didn't speak to a single person there that didn't have somebody in their company that was focused on that piece of their business. And I, again, right, just come back to that, right? Like these companies aren't seeing like as much fluctuation in terms of how the market impacts them, right? They're overcoming those limitations. And I think a big piece of that is the investment of their leadership team, but also the fact that they are aware of the fact that there are things that they need to be doing to grow, marketing being one of those, and that they're consistently investing in those things.
Yeah, and on that note of focusing, whether it's digital or traditional, I started laughing the first day because I think to start off, we have 3 different people come up to us and say, yeah, I do traditional marketing, a lot of referral based, a lot of word of mouth, and they weren't really mentioning digital, especially up front. And you just looked at me, you're like, oh my gosh, like this is actually a thing. Because at the build show or the expos or build shows, we got that a lot. Hey, no thanks, I'm good. So for you, how cool is it to be in that room and realize, oh wait, we now need to pivot some of our own marketing to tailor to that?
Yeah, I think it was an insight into the way contractors think. I think, right, like a lot of other businesses, like they're not going to have as much success with word of mouth, but I think it's pretty clear that when you put out an amazing product, you can grow to a pretty decent size without much other kind of investment. But I will say all of them, even though they said that, right, they're getting to that point where they're then beginning to look for other vendors, right? So as much as they might say we're not doing a lot in terms of digital, a lot of them were doing something, right? So they were still dealing with some type of vendor that was doing maybe ads for them. And maybe even if it isn't like strictly digital, some of them were playing the game of OTT, which bridges that gap between something that is traditional and a digital marketing strategy. But yeah, like it definitely like a different perspective on like how they perceive their need, right? I think a lot of those companies really could benefit, right? It's not a question of either or, right? Digital marketing is something that can really supercharge, right, the approach that you're using. And of course, like if we have people come in like and they're saying like, I'm only doing this one thing for marketing, that's a red flag, right? Because if that's the only channel you're investing in and that dries up, ultimately you're kind of SOL, right? So I think more than anything, it became it was an awareness thing for me of saying, okay, like these people are doing something, right? They just might not be as aware of opportunities that they could have in the digital space.
Yeah, even with the larger ones, like I've come back and looked at, we looked at their socials, we looked at their websites, and these are the companies that are saying, look, like we already have a full in-house marketing division. So on paper, you're like, oh, okay, like they don't need us because they have somebody in-house. But just the sheer knowledge, I mean, this is why people contractors sub stuff out, because it's like, if there's a new way to do something, like it is very hard to continuously run your business, plus do all the innovative stuff that needs to happen. So, as we're coming back and looking at socials and looking at websites and looking at brand presence, we're like, oh, wow, like here's a few things that like, to us are like, no brand, hey, tweak this, like, hey, you are categorized right now, like you are a large design, build, remodeling firm, and you're classified on Google as a contractor, when in reality, like you could classify yourself as a remodeler, or in the very least a general contractor, but like just a contractor puts you in, kind of like the lower, like, oh, I see a contractor come out here, which is closer to like maybe a handyman, which is not a big deal. But if you're really shooting for $500 to $1 million projects, you're probably not Googling contractor. You're probably Googling, remodeling company or general contractor. So it still showed the need that like the internet world changes so fast that I mean, half our job on the SEO side is to like, okay, Google just made an update. Let's figure out what they want this time. So it just continuously shifts. And like for us to have a department dedicated towards that, it then shows with people that even have their own in-house, like a vast majority of where they get the work from is still referrals and past customers, because to get new clients online, it changes so fast that it's very hard for one individual or even a few individuals to make it happen. You almost need somebody who's like sole focus it is to this one thing and figure out, okay, Google changed. What does that mean for this industry as a whole, and what needs to be changed from there? Because that's hard enough. So that was like the other piece that even if they have a full team, when we went back and looked, it's like, oh, that's a quick, easy fix that'll get them results. That's another quick, easy fix. The one thing that I will say is the big companies, they have amazing photos. Like the work they do is super cool. The photos represent them in a very good light. I mean, I put out a post on my Facebook page like a few weeks ago, and it just talked about when you list a house on the MLS, when you're trying to sell your house, professionally shot photos compared to somebody taking an iPhone sell, and it was like for like 15% higher, maybe it was 10% higher. But when you're talking about a $600,000 house up to $1 million house, like that is $60,000 to $100,000 that we're talking about on a 10% increase simply by hiring a company that knows how to stage the room and take the right photos, because it makes it pop that much more, because it's more people that want that house because of the demand. So they all do the right things as far as like the basic foundation, which was awesome. And they have a lot of good relationships and very strategic way of reaching out to past customers. When it comes to like the digital landscape, which is really, let's take what you're doing and put it on steroids. Like even them are still like, all right, like we got some room to grow here.
I have a question for you, actually. This was one of like the first time that we've been in a room with companies specifically of that size. We've gone to other events where it's like a wide mix, but like this is next level, like the epitome of our ideal client, design, build, remodeling. And there you were on stage multiple times. People kept coming up to you. They came up to me a few times. Hey, I've seen you on YouTube. I watch all your stuff. So to be in a position to where we are now known in the bigger ballpark, what does that do for your own confidence?
It really shows. It's really like these people. So like one of the larger companies that were there, we were talking, and he was like, I just want to be like known by every single person in this area for a long time. He's like, I need a long-term strategy here. So with those people, they shift from, they're not saying, hey, I need leads now, or I need leads in 4 months. They're like, look, we built enough of a reputation. Now we're looking at like the big game plan here, like long-term sustainability. That's what we're after. So for me, that shows like, okay, like, like when we sat down after this event and said, how do we know if this event is, like, how do we know if it's a win or not? It wasn't like, oh, do we get any leads from it or any sales from it? It's like, we will find out in about 12 months to like over that span, have any more relationships been built up from people at the events. Like we're about to go to the Remodelers Summit this upcoming week in Chicago, and we went last year and we got one sale from it last year. Well, with that one sale, our whole strategy to go back into this year is like, hey, look, one of you guys that we did work for, and other people have been asking this client of ours about what it was like working with us. I expect to go back in this time and have a little bit more gusto and bravado of, hey, we were here last year. You didn't know us. The same thing in this case, for this one compared to, the Chicago event coming up in a week. It's good to know that the stuff on YouTube that we're doing, the stuff in this podcast that we're doing, our name is starting to move around the industry, because we've only been in business for 6 years, which for some people, they've been in business for 3 years and it feels like forever. But like now that I look at it, I'm like, it's only been 6 years of CGF, which in the grand scheme of like, I know we're in this world where you raise venture capital and 3 years in, now you're valued at 50 million and that's like everyone's goal. But like, for small business, like a lot of these companies have been around for 75 years. And it's like, well, that's probably how they got to the point where they're doing, 8 figures a year. It wasn't like they just did this in 6 years. So it was very cool just to know that we're doing the right stuff. And just because we put out this podcast, we don't then turn around and expect for it to generate a bunch of work the same way that like this is all, it's still a relationship business. And that's all it really is. Just most people in the design, build, and contracting space is more used to offline relationships and shaking hands. While what this does is this is really just an online relationship that we're just continuously building for people at a much more scalable way. So for me, it's the same game that we're playing, but it's just very cool to hear like we're doing the right stuff.
Yeah, I'd say that like pace of growth component honestly speaks really to the power of digital marketing too, though. It's like you have these companies, right, that are 30 years old, 50 years old, 75 years old, right? And they're doing a couple million revenue, which is awesome, right? But thinking about the sheer volume of time, right, that is required to grow a business that way, like to that scale, I think speaks to the potency of digital marketing as a tool, right? So it of course, like you don't want to not be doing all the traditional handshaking and making sure that your name's getting out in your community. But if you really want to build at a quicker clip, right, making sure that you are investing in as many possible channels as you can is really the strategy that is going to get your brand out there, right? So we've been around for 6 years, right? And we are just starting to become known in these bigger circles, right? Which is awesome for us. But 6 years is a relatively short timeline to be getting yourself into a market, right, as aggressively as we have. So I think really like a lot of these companies too, like I think they're aware of the fact that times are changing and that they are going to need a more comprehensive digital approach going forward. But I think, right, in many cases, they may have marketing professionals that just come from another era, right? It's not that what they're doing is wrong or bad, right? It's been very effective, right? It's gotten them to the scale that they're at. But they were trained in a period of time where marketing really consisted of right, newspapers, billboards, and TV, right? Maybe some radio mixed in there, right? Which is a great mix. But there is this whole other set of channels that have a way bigger audience, right? And the ability to target in a way that other tools don't. So I think that is I don't know, it's cool to have those conversations with people that just have built their company in a very different way than we have. And to realize too that like our ability to grow so quickly is really been because of the way we have leveraged a more contemporary tool set, right? And we are bringing that tool set to a market that maybe isn't always the most receptive because they've had such success with the traditional methodology so far. But I think, I don't know, that to me was, it just stuck with me because it's like, okay, right? Like we really could supercharge some of these businesses that are using a more traditional methodology by introducing them to a way of marketing and a way of presenting their company that they may not be comfortable with, but that we know for sure is effective because it's been effective for us.
And I think the kind of tying that back into what we talked about earlier was a lot of the marketing that these people have done, those are more of the long-term approach style marketing. So like, let's just take the idea of getting professionally shot photos. The trends of, let's say, a kitchen, they change maybe every, let's say 10 years. It's, the kitchen I'm in right now at my house was redone in like 2018. So it's probably about 5 years old at this point. But it's still, people walk in like, wow, this is a beautiful kitchen. Like, it's pretty trendy. So it doesn't change a crazy amount. But like for these companies that like then go out and take professionally shot photos, like that now they can use that in the very least for 10 years. So everything that they're doing is really focused on, let's do something that's going to last us a long time versus let's do something that's just for the here and now. So it's like, then you have the other side of the aisle, which is more of the smaller, like quick thinking companies that are like, we're just going to run Google ads, which if it works, that's great. But as soon as you stop paying Google, everything goes away unless you were able to then monetize those customers, take that customer, get them to buy again, and then get them, to refer you out, which is how it should be done anyway. But for a lot of people, essentially, they're just throwing money at like a Google ad or like, hey, I put up a billboard for a month and they didn't let it go long enough for it to actually continuously get in front of people because, there's always been this notion in marketing of like, it's the rule of 7, which is you need to get your brand or your message in front of somebody 7 times for them to then take an action. But like Google predicts it's close to like 200 because of how much stimuli and how much we're seeing across the board on social media and everything now. So with a lot of these other companies that are larger, they think more long-term. And it's like, we all listen to Alex Ramosi, who's like really big in the business and marketing world. And one of his famous phrases is, if you're not going to do it for 10 years, or if you're not going to do it forever, don't do it for a day. So it's kind of like with dieting. He's like, I'm not going to do a crazy crash course diet because I may look good in 2 months, but I'm then going to rebound right back up. And that's not good for anybody. So let me build something that's sustainable and just recognize that like Rome is not built in a day, but they do very sustainable things. So that's what was very cool with a lot of these larger companies, is that they're not looking at this as like, what can you do tomorrow? Because, we could easily put up a Facebook ad for any of our clients and go, hey, if you want your kitchen remodeled, fill out this Facebook lead form. And what that's going to do, if it's done in the wrong way, is you're going to get a lot of leads, and you're going to get people that want to remodel their kitchen for $8,000, or maybe not. Maybe they're just like, hey, I just had, some questions, which is not bad, but you just have to recognize that like putting money into things that last a long time, that is how these companies, these larger ones, have built up their business over 50 years, because they played the long game compared to, let me just do the, put a bunch of money into Valpak and these, Groupons, which is quick wins in the door. Again, not a bad idea, but those people then have to buy over and over and over, or do a really good job of referring you out. Otherwise, you're always going to be in this cycle where it's like a drug that if you stop paying, it immediately falls off the face of the earth.
Let's wrap it up with this. One final question for both of you. What is one takeaway from the event that you're now going to implement into your role here at CGN?
Yeah, I think more than anything, we're going to change the way we do our messaging a little bit. I think there are, like, I'm an SEO guy, right? And so like at the end of the day, if you're going to convince me to buy a product, what I want are details, right? And I think many times it's easy to let your own biases about, right, how you speak to your consumers influence your language, right? And so because that's impactful to me, I assume it will be impactful to others, right? But I think these conversations we were having with some of these larger contractors is, they know they need marketing, they know they need digital marketing. They couldn't care less about how technical SEO works, right? They want to know what the impact of a program or of a service offering is going to be, right? So I think a lot of what we need to do better at CGN, right, is showing that impact, right, and making sure that we're delivering that to the right people. So I think that was the big takeaway for me, and definitely something that's going to influence CGN.
Yeah, and mine is really the idea of this consulting or accountability piece. We've been talking about it, where this is part of our vision here at CGN, is by 2025, so at the time of this recording, 16 months out, really lean heavily into social media consulting. Because a lot of this is like on the social media side, like I'm still a firm believer that like you as a contracting company or design build firm should use your own content, your own, photos, videos, things like that. Because then it shows authenticity. We see enough of like, hey, it's 4th of July. Here's 9 different, recipes that you like. It's the same stuff that like BuzzFeed puts out, but these companies put it out essentially to check the box to say, hey, we put something out. But like no consumer looks at that and goes, man, these 9 recipes are so good, I'm going to buy this kitchen tomorrow. Like it just doesn't work like that. So the social media consulting piece, which we've already been doing informally, is something that we're going to really continue to build out here at CGN, because it, when we build somebody, say a website, and if they just get a website, well, the social media piece is a great way to now proactively promote themselves and promote the website. And then on the SEO side, how do you get to the top of Google? The blogs are great, but Google wants to see strong brands that are holistic brands, and Google wants to trust you. And what better way to build trust with a company than if they have a large engaged following on Facebook and Instagram, which again, Google can see. Video plays unbelievably well on social media. So being able to take those and layer them into more, both organic but also advertising campaigns where it's, hey, let's show some of these project photos to a colder audience to say, hey, check out what we can do. And then the people that have engaged with those posts in the certain neighborhoods that we want them to be in, we can then retarget them directly on the platform and say, hey, you just just saw these photos. Do you want to see the full project walkthrough video? It's 3 minutes long, which now that just very quickly engages people more. So for me on my side is, because I'm kind of really realizing like I'm a product guy at heart. Like I enjoy building a good product, and like for as much as like I like sales, I really like sales to be like, hey, you're not going to move forward. Okay. What would this product need to do or need to look like for you to say I'm in? Because then that's what excites me to turn around and like build the product or like tweak it. So that's what I'm looking forward to is building out a more structured framework. And like our account managers already do a great job of that. But now it's like, all right, let's add some fuel to this fire. That's what we're going for.
And I would just say, there we go. And I would just say mine would be very similar to Ian, shocking as we're both run CGN marketing. But mine just could be like actually taking the time to explain why these things matter. Because I can make a video, hey, here's how to optimize your Facebook profile. Hey, here are 10 social media templates for you to use. But if you don't understand the why on the why to focus on Instagram Reels over Instagram photo posts, it doesn't actually do you any good. Because you need to understand that why in order to actually take the step into action.
Cool. Love it. All right. That's all we got. We'll see you guys next time. If you just listen to this podcast like the day or two that it came out and you're actually heading to the Remodelers Summit Conference this upcoming week, stop by the CGN booth. We'd love to chat more about your specific scenario and even talk some strategy of what is coming up in 2024 and beyond.